I think another sort of something that we encountered, and Sandeep, maybe you can weigh in on that if you can, with sort of VIPER. How do I put it? What's missing, if you will, for the lack of better description, is kind of assembly of VIPER, collection of VIPER objects, right? Assembly and or initialization, aka factory, right? What we end up doing in several places in our refactoring efforts is to kind of actually, yeah, literally extract factories.
I think what you meant is module to actually create a VIPER stack.
Yes, yeah, we created those factory module objects for, again, couldn't come up with a better name, but they would be collecting or initializing anything that interactor and or presenter need in terms of like service, this core data service or networking service or whatever else, and then creating presenters, presenter, interactor, and the view, and I think the router as well, right, Sandeep?
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you, what's from your experience, Jeff? Like, I think you mentioned factories, right, a few times. Is this something that kind of often starts to come up or evolve? Because, for example, at Wayfair, this whole factory duties were shoved into router, and router kind of became very large and had dual purpose, unfortunately.
Yeah, so in mine, so like the router or the navigator, it is responsible for knowing how to navigate somewhere. So when you tell a router, take me to the transfer funds screen, so the way I have it set up is that the router or the navigator has access to a factory. And so it can ask the factory, get me the transfer funds view controller. And it'll get back from the factory, and let's say it'll push it on the current navigation stack that it sort of owns. And so in this case, like the navigator is sort of the one that's responsible for controlling the contents of, generically speaking, a container view. So like navigation controllers, if you pop up a modal, it would be in charge of that modal view, and certainly like may have an application-wide one that is responsible for the root view of the root view control of the window. And so I tend to have multiple navigators in the app, and I have a separate factory associated with each navigator or router. And again, those tend to be tied around lifetimes of containing view controller. So if you're going to, say if you want to need to pop up a modal of maybe 3 or 4 screens in it for whatever reason, that will have its own navigator that's responsible for that modal, and probably the navigation controller inside of it, controlling all the views. And then it is responsible for creating the view controllers, the 3 or 4 view controllers that you would likely see inside that modal. And so certainly the factory is guaranteed to have the lifetime of that, say, modal. And so it can have, so it can hold on to all your dependencies that you need. And you may only have dependencies that only make sense to exist during the lifetime of that window that aren't available for the lifetime of the app. But as long as, but so that factory can hold on to those. And then when the modal disappears, the factory goes with it. And anything that it was holding on to also goes along with it, and gets released from memory.
So the factory would be then that assembly place that creates or gets dependencies, and then creates the router, interactor, and the rest of the stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of times, like since factories and they're typically associated with the router, so they're told the router that they're working with. But yeah, so it will certainly the factory has this possibility of sort of piecing together the sort of interactor and presenter in view that you need to work with, and then also injecting any dependencies needed by them. And so the factory would typically be maybe if factory B depends on a few items with a longer lifetime, factory A may provide those in the factory B. So say here's your network service that you're going to use or whatever.